Thank you, Mr. President. Reserving the right to object. I have to begin by thanking my friend and colleague, the senator from Pennsylvania, for his efforts to ensure that pregnant women have access to accommodations, reasonable accommodations at work. They need to have healthy pregnancies. As the husband of a wife who had 2 children while she was working and the grandfather of 2 grandchildren with a daughter who's a nurse, I absolutely want to make sure that those sort of reasonable accommodations are accounted for. However, in its current form, this legislation before us would give federal bureaucrats at the EEOC authority to mandate that employers nationwide provide accommodations such as leave to obtain abortions on demand under the guise of pregnancy-related condition. Worse still, the legislation would subject pro-life organizations, including churches and religious organizations, to potentially crippling lawsuits if they refuse to facilitate abortions in direct violation of their religious beliefs and their moral convictions. Unlike Title VII and the Americans with Disabilities Act, this legislation contains no exemptions for religious organizations. Mr. President, I and a number of other people do not believe that abortion is health care. I believe it's a brutal procedure that destroys an innocent child. The federal government should not be promoting abortion, let alone mandating that pro-life employers and employers in states that protect life facilitate abortion on demand. I hope that we can work together on this legislation and amend it to address those concerns so that all the reasonable accommodations that they've worked so hardly to achieve can be passed and can gain my support and the support of other colleagues. But until such time, sir, I have to object, and on behalf of Senator Lankford, Senator Daines, and myself, I do object.
Ms. Hurd.
Mr. President,
Senator from Pennsylvania.
I yield to my colleague from Louisiana.
Mr. President, I regret that my
Senator from Louisiana.
I'm sorry. Mr. President, I regret that my colleague has objected to this bill. But I reject the characterization that this would do anything to promote abortion. It's probably not important that I think what I think. I will quote the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. Last night, they said, this is the Catholic bishops, we believe that this version of the bill, read in light of existing religious liberty protections, helps advance the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops' goal of ensuring that no woman ever feels forced to choose between her future and the life of her child while protecting the conscience, rights, and religious freedoms of employers. This is the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops last night. And I think as a physician, I can now speak. As a physician, I will say that there are times when a woman, if she wishes to continue in the workforce, needs an accommodation. The Cincinnati police officer, or the Louisville police officer, which was quoted in the Cincinnati paper, spoke about her need for light accommodation. But those who are ultimately her boss would not give it to her because she was not, quote, injured. So they had a policy in which if you needed it on a doctor's order, you should, unless it was a doctor's order because of pregnancy. And she was told if she sought to use that, she would lose her insurance. At 5 months pregnant, she's going to lose her insurance. Mr. President, I would argue the pro-life position is to make an accommodation for that woman who has those needs so that she can safely carry the baby to term. Now, by the way, it's also good for business. Others who are endorsing this from the business sector, I'll just give one, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. They clearly see that this is something which is a reasonable accommodation, not forced by unnamed bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. upon people who are employing others across the nation. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce has made this a top priority. And as regards the pro-life issue, let me also point out that the March of Dimes, which is so vitally concerned about the health of children, likewise support. My colleague has mentioned that it passed out of the Help Committee, 19-2, strongly bipartisan, and then passed the House with 315 bipartisan results. Now, we have experience with these laws nationwide. 30 states have laws such as this already, but that leaves millions of American women uncovered. And our goal was to address it with this bill. Now, let me just go back once more because this apparently was a sticking point. Is it possible that this law would permit someone to impose their will upon a pastor, upon a church, upon a synagogue, if they have religious exemptions? The answer is absolutely no. And this is what the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops was referring to. The Title VII exemption, which is in federal law, remains in place. It allows employers to make employment decisions based on firmly held religious beliefs. This bill does not change this. And there's an exemption in Title VI related to how pastors and ministers and rabbis would conduct their business. All that remains in place, which is why the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops last night once again endorsed the bill. Now, I think even those who oppose would agree that we need to have a safe environment for pregnant women and their unborn children in the workplace. They deserve our attention. I would say that this bill is pro-family, pro-mother, pro-baby, pro-employer, and pro-economy. I hope at a later point we can pass. Thank you, and I yield.